Welcome to AI in Action, Exploring Tomorrow's Tech Today, the podcast where we delve into the groundbreaking world of artificial intelligence. I'm Maurie, and with me is my husband, Jim. With our combined expertise in technology and education, we're here to guide you through the AI revolution. Whether it's the latest news headlines or transformative AI applications in classrooms, healthcare, and beyond, we're here to make sense of it all. Together, let's uncover how AI is reshaping our world from everyday encounters to the future of work. So let's dive in and explore tomorrow's tech today. Hello, welcome to episode 12 of AI in Action, exploring tomorrow's tech today. My name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband, Jim, and today we are going to be talking about artificial intelligence and agriculture. Now, the reason that artificial intelligence and agriculture means a little bit to me is because I grew up in East Texas, and some of the things we're going to cover is we're going to cover small farms.
Hold on. Where in East Texas?
I grew up in a little itsy bitsy town named Fred, Texas.
And the speed limit through Fred was
55 miles an hour the whole way through.
Wasn't even a stop sign.
We had a stop sign at the end of some of the county roads, but they kept getting taken so people could put them on the outsides of their houses.
Right.
So very small town, East Texas. So, a small farm in America. The joke is that my dad raised and sold watermelons, which he did, but he sold them on the side of the road to pay for my hospital bill when I was born, which later I found out that was true, but the hospital bill wasn't actually that expensive. But
that was a couple of years ago.
We used to play in the cornfields. We would gather around all the rocking chairs and put them in the middle of the living room with a huge sheet in between all the rocking chairs and just dump out bushels of black-eyed peas, and we'd sit there until our fingers basically bled because of shelling
And this
peas.
is a good thing.
Yeah, it's memories. It's a lot of memories.
Like bad memories.
One of the things that I think is important is what artificial intelligence is doing for agriculture, because our population is increasing.
It's getting bigger.
Our food production is decreasing. A lot of it has to do with land that's no longer usable. It has to do with family farms that are getting bought out, families that aren't having children that want to inherit the farm. And there's lots of different reasons.
At least small farms.
Yeah, small farms.
The big agri-farms are probably continuing to get bigger. I read once that people like Bill Gates, who really thinks farming's, he loves owning farmland. He's got like 2 million acres or something like that, 200.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
It's a massive, massive number.
One of the things that we talk about, I moved from East Texas to Central Texas when I was 14. We sold the cows, sold the land, and moved here. My dad changed jobs or was promoted in his job. And that's why we came here. And it was quite the culture shock, because I quickly realized, I think you made a comment just a couple of seconds ago before we started the podcast, that the blades of grass here are a mile apart versus in East Texas, it's more rain. I don't know if it still is. I haven't been back in a while, but it's much more fertile ground. And we could run 15 head of cattle per acre versus here, it's like 1 per acre.
Well, and when you're in East Texas, you don't really spend a lot of time, or at least you didn't at the time, thinking about water.
No.
Here, it's all about water.
It's a commodity.
At the school, we had a local rancher. I don't know how many. Here, a ranch is probably 1,000 acres or something, because it's got to be bigger. But he came to us because he wanted us to help him design a water monitoring. He had tanks that his cows drank out of, and if the windmill broke down, because they were pretty far and he only checked on them like once a week because of the size of the ranch, the cows would die.
Right.
So he wanted some kind of water monitoring system that would notify him that the tank was not working. Otherwise, he would lose his cows. So water's everything out here.
Mhm.
That's why those blades of grass are so far apart.
So let's talk about artificial intelligence and what artificial intelligence is doing just in the agricultural industry. So we took some articles and we read through them, and then we used AI to help us summarize and get some key points out that we want to share with our audience. First of all, we agree that the agricultural industry is one of the most important sectors in the American economy.
Go to the grocery store right now
Uh,
and buy just about anything, right?
Very
It's
expensive.
very,
Very expensive.
very expensive.
AI in agriculture is new. At least it is.
Well, in its
what
current
we're currently
form,
using it for
the
is new.
generative AI that we talk about so much is a newer thing.
Right.
Machine learning has been around for a while, and there are several ways that we found where people are using it. And I'm not surprised that they're using them. For example, in Iowa,
they're using ag AI to predict the best times to plant and to harvest the crops. In Nebraska, they're using it to automate all their feeding and monitoring water and watering their livestock and stuff like that.
Maybe they're having water problems in Nebraska too.
And that's freeing up time so that they can then focus on other tasks that they need to do around the farms. In Kansas, they're using it to improve, again, water use.
It's all about that water.
So it's helping them conserve it and reduce their environmental impact. So I would like to actually read a definition of what AI in agriculture means. What it does is it involves integrating advanced computational technologies and algorithms into farming practices to enhance various aspects of agriculture. And it encompasses things like machine learning, deep learning, computer vision, which is, I saw a video the other day of them sorting tomatoes, the green tomatoes versus the red tomatoes, using computer vision.
From the looks of that stuff, that was big farms.
It was big farm.
That was the big guys, because that looked like very expensive. It was cool, but it looked really expensive.
So natural language processing, and then robotics to actually collect, analyze, and interpret agricultural data.
I think the interesting part about this is that when you see videos, which some of the ones you showed me, which got you interested in us doing this podcast, a lot of it had to do with computer vision, and a lot of it had to do with figuring out what to do with that data. We've talked about it here, even simple things. My daughter likes to grow a small little thing in her backyard, and she
very small, 2 little tomatoes, and she's so excited.
Oh, yeah, and I had the same problem she did. It was, how do you know when it's time to water? So you go and you put yourself in a watering system, because that's important out here. Well, then you've got to monitor to make sure your watering system is giving an adequate amount of water. Well, how you do that? Well, you have to have a soil moisture monitor. Mm-hmm. And then the heat, because we've had this horrible heat wave this summer. So now you're trying to get some shade over them part of the day, because even if they say full sun, they don't mean this kind of sun.
Central Texas sun.
They don't mean this kind of sun.
Not unless you grow in cactus.
The point is, there's just a ton of data involved. And I think a lot of what AI is doing has to do with trying to figure out how to optimize what to do and when to do it and what to plant and how far apart to plant it and how much water. All that stuff is data driven.
Right. And the key applications, the articles that we were reading, the key applications of AI in agriculture are things like the precision farming, which is what you're talking about, all that data analysis so that you can be very, very precise, to monitor your crops, to manage your crops, to predict how much you're going to harvest, to have machinery and robots that are autonomous, which means they can actually do tasks. I mean, everyone says, AI is going to take away jobs. Robots are going to take away jobs. If you are a farmer and you are trying to get people to help you, how many times do we drive by and see signs on the big gates saying help wanted?
And that's here, where farming is not that, it's not as big here as it used to be.
So, but let's
there's
think
more
about
ranchers raising cattle here than there is farms. But yeah, they have to have people, and
they can't get them. They can't get reliable help. So livestock monitoring, which I thought was interesting. I remember when I was a little girl, my dad had a book that we kept in the desk drawer that was basically every single piece of livestock he had ever had. Probably had in there from like even his father before him, and it had their name and their sire and how many calves they'd had, how many bulls they'd had,
and how much they weighed, and how much food they used.
If you took them to auction, how much you got for them. I mean, and all that
all
stuff.
that data.
And, and I'll never forget, he gave each one of us a cow when we were little. And then every time it would have a calf, if it was a calf,
if it was a cow, you get
it was a calf that would
female,
we would get to keep it and continue to breed it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it was a bull, he auctioned it when it got big enough.
Yeah, can't have
because he didn't want too many bulls in the pen.
Yeah.
My sister, she had one that every one of them was a bull. She was so upset. Almost every one of them. She had this one cow. All it had was bulls. But anyway, so livestock monitoring. And then, of course, supply chain management. That's a big thing. We talked last time about the supply chain and how AI is helping with, streamlining the supply chain. Well, it's the same thing with agriculture.
So what happened here, probably this year too, but definitely happened a few years ago? What were they trying to find desperately? Remember? Hay.
Oh,
nobody could get any hay. You
No
talk
one
about
could
supply
get
chain
hay.
management. The stores couldn't get it. People were driving, trying to find hay for their cattle.
Forever.
Or
They were driving
I think
long distances.
Didn't your dad end up selling? He had some goats or something. He had to sell them because he couldn't get hay.
Every one of them, he had to get rid of every one of them.
I
And I heard of farmers that were doing that too. They were just selling out because of it.
Yes.
Now the situation though, that another article I read was about the data analytics. AI has a lot of data tools. We just talked about how farmers, small farms specifically, tend to not have the youth involved as much. They go off to college. Sometimes they come back. Sometimes they don't. So they're a little slow to adopt.
Well, I mean,
the data tools.
These data tools up until the current AI, and that's one of my biggest complaints about most of these data analytics tools before the current large language models, the natural language interfaces.
They're hard to use.
You got to have a PhD in spreadsheets just to figure out all the data. And when you're out there trying to keep your farm going, know where your cows are, or making sure your crops are getting, fed, or the bugs aren't eating them, or whatever it is you're trying to do. It's probably pretty obvious I'm not a farmer or a rancher, and never was. Here, I grew up in a small town, but I grew up in the town. I didn't grow up on a farm.
Basically, the slang is when you're up to your blank and alligators, you can't worry about draining the swamp. And that's kind of where they're at. So according to statistics in the U.S. specifically, less than half of our farmers are using management software. They're still using the book like my dad did.
My grandmother had one of those books. You know what she tracked with hers?
Wasn't it lake levels?
Lake levels. Water, about the water again.
It'd be 0 right about now.
The water. It's always about the water around here. Yeah.
So, and then they also, one of the statistics say that only 25% of them are utilizing remote sensing precision. So then you have them having to go like the remote sensor that could sense how full or how low the tank is. If they're not using those types of sensors, what are they doing? They're traveling in their trucks, in their, we call them mules, the 4-wheel drive type things. They're traveling around, they're looking at it. Now, they don't trust it. They don't trust the technology.
Well, I can't blame them for that. It's not just about trusting the technology, though. I've built some of those sensors before, and it's tough. You got to get them out in the middle of nowhere. You got to get them power. How are they going to communicate? Mm-hmm. How's the data going to be collected? They're not cheap unless you're built. I mean, I built mine myself because for my little small monitoring I was doing, but if they want them to be, super tested and robust, they got to buy them. Well, I'm sure most of these people that sell these nowadays, they want their sensor to connect to their data tool,
right? Which
means you've got to have a subscription in order to get access. It's like our environmental monitoring we have at the school.
Mm-hmm.
It monitors the environment in the classrooms and the temperature in the freezers and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we have an online version that we have probably pay for every year to where we can go in and look at all that environmental sensors and stuff. So,
well, they're saying that one of the reasons that farmers are slow to adopt is because of that first push. The first push they did before artificial intelligence, when they were saying, hey, you need to use these sensors, you need to use these data tools. Well, they had usability issues with them. You were just saying, where's the internet connection going to come from in the middle of nowhere? Where's the power source going to come from? What about the software? It's slow. The software was slow. The interfaces were complex. They were difficult to manage. And so all of a sudden they're not going to use it.
Well, nowadays they claim, cell phones are the answer, right? You just put you can put a cell phone in every tank. What's even funnier about the cell phone thing is drive 3 or 4 miles west of Llano and try to make a phone call on your cell phone. All the cell companies claim they have coverage out there, and there's a lot of ranches that direction.
Now there
But
is
you can't make a cell phone call, therefore you can't get your data back.
exactly. Okay, so there is one thing that I think ranchers and farmers are starting to use a little more often.
Hmm.
Drones.
I agree with that, and I think that. I mean, we even had when we had a drone in your class. Remember, the principal borrowed it because
Yes.
he wanted to go check.
Coyotes.
He wanted to go check coyotes because they were
Hmm.
bothering his cows,
Hmm.
and then I think he crashed it though.
Yeah, he did. He broke it.
He broke it. But
Yeah.
anyway, but the point is that now drones are getting cheaper. I mean, didn't we have a guy recently here in Llano that bought a
Yes,
very
a
expensive
very expensive
drone
drone
for spraying?
spraying pesticides,
Oh, no,
fence lines.
yeah, it was
I
just for fence
fence
lines. It
lines and
wasn't
stuff.
actually on
But
crops, but
okay, so let's talk about this drone article. Now, the reason I found the drone article useful is because we were just talking about the data stuff, and they don't want to do it because the guy having to drive out to the tank to see how it's going. Well, what if you fly a drone to monitor? You can sit at your location with your drone and fly it over your tanks and
yeah,
see what the level of your tanks
absolutely.
are. So,
And even if you can't get the signal straight back, the drone can come back to you. You
and
can
you
pop the
can
little card out
and
of
you
it,
can look at it
and
on
you
an
can look
SD
at the
card.
videos off
Yes,
the SD card.
absolutely.
And
So
they've gotten much cheaper.
much cheaper, much cheaper.
We bought our little drone for less than $100. Of course,
Yes.
a high wind would have blown it
Yeah.
away, but the drone you had in your class at the time was $5,000 because remember that guy donated it.
Yeah, I
But
think you
now
can get
that
it for
same
two.
drone's less than two, probably less than
Less
two.
than two.
Yeah.
So some of the things that drones are doing, some of the key points that drones are bringing are the efficiency, like we were just talking about. You can have a cost reduction because if I'm not paying somebody to go out and check all my fence lines, then I'm having a reduction in cost. The data it can get,
It's all about the data.
you can watch for like dry patches and things within your fields. Just make sure you're getting your coverage of your
Remember, you
irrigation
flew it over the
systems.
baseball field. They wanted to fly it over the baseball fields here to make sure they didn't have dead spots because you
Yes.
can't see the dead spots as well standing on the field
Yes.
as you can from an aerial shot.
So anyway, precision, stuff like that. So the role of AI in agriculture, it's going to aid farmers in making sense of the data. So let's take the data that we're collecting through all these other means
And fine tune the
and
model.
fine tune the model so that I can get exactly out of it what I need.
How long do you think it's going to be before there's probably already some of these big, ones that sell the tractors and the equipment and all that stuff that they don't want you to work on?
Caterpillar, John Deere.
They're probably
all
out
that.
there right now fine tuning a large language model
Yes.
with all of this information so the farmers can have instead of having to, sort of like what I've done with my phone, where I can tell my phone to use the ChatGPT in order to, like Siri now. Well, this gives them a natural language interface to all that information. And they can ask stuff like, how are my tanks? Or what's the level? Or do you see any dry patches? Or, that kind of stuff, especially with multimodal models. They can use that to interface with their own data.
And that natural language interface is helping them get over that data overload.
Yeah, I mean, it's why we use it, right?
So maybe they will be quicker to adopt with AI-driven data analytics versus just data analytics.
Hopefully, it will be cost-effective. What I don't want to see is all the small farms go away. I mean, more and more of these farms, like you said, the kids are moving away. My dad used to say that ranchers live poor and die rich because when they're alive, they're trying to make it, they're taking out their loans, they're trying to make ends meet, they're doing everything. When they die, their family probably sells off the land. So they have all this value that they didn't get to really have when they were growing up in it or living in it. But people love doing it. Otherwise, they wouldn't stick, which is a good thing. I like the small farms. I would like to see AI kind of level the playing field for the small farmers, even for monitoring stuff. Like one of the big boosts I'd heard for small farmers was the natural, not the natural, but the organics. I mean, that's why it was so important that organics were labeled the way they were, and they were so strict about it at the time. And most of the big farming consortiums really didn't think organics was going to take off because it was more expensive. Well, they were wrong, and it became this multi-billion-dollar industry, but it helped the small farmers. And I'm hoping AI can do the same thing where it can keep the small farmers going because of all the data.
Well, the market projection for global the global AI
Mm-hmm.
agricultural market
Right.
is projected to reach 11.13 billion
By 2032.
by 2032.
9 years.
9 years. So,
No,
but
11 years. 11 years.
the big thing though is it's not that it's projected to reach that, it's that it is growing by 23% annually.
And I'm going to get the math right here in a minute. That's 9 years, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't even know what year it is, but
it's 2023.
So, they're going to start using the data that they'd be crazy not to.
I can see how they would.
There are governments that are putting initiatives behind this because they know that it has to happen. Our
drowning in
population
data.
our population is growing. We have to have AI based farming technology is going to get government backing.
And whatever you believe the cause is, climate change does not help. You get an increased population, you get less land that's stable for farming.
Mm-hmm.
You think about corn. Corn is like entire states that have corn across them.
Yes.
Think about monitoring the corn output of all those. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's drones flying everywhere doing that right now.
Yeah.
Or satellites, maybe.
The drone analytics. There's a lot of growth happening in Asia, of course.
Of course, there's a lot of population in Asia.
A lot of population. Major companies are putting AI as a service solution into agriculture. Now, when I say that, I mean, you talked about the software and the data and who owns the services.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're talking IBM, Microsoft.
I haven't heard of these other two, Granular and Discardis.
I don't know, but anyway. But the two big ones that I noticed was IBM.
You know, Microsoft. Google's got to be in there somewhere.
Google has to be in there somewhere. But if they're putting money in it, okay, then it underscores that there is significant growth and investment opportunities in AI-driven agriculture. Bill Gates definitely.
I don't think he's the biggest one either. I think there's another billionaire that has more land than Bill Gates does.
Probably. Now, we only have a few minutes left of this discussion of artificial intelligence, and so I had to wrap it back around into education because we have to educate the future, the future of agriculture. Our kids are our future. And there is a program out there called Farm Beats. Mm-hmm. It's a Microsoft program. But it's for students. So if you are listening and you're in education, if you're like a science teacher or an ag teacher or anything like that, the overview of this program is basically it's a curriculum that's co-developed between, I think, the Future Farmers of America and Microsoft. I think there might have been one more like farm type club that was in it, but it's a curriculum and it takes students and you get a hardware kit that's affordable, that has like a Raspberry Pi and some environmental sensors and some things like that. The objective is to teach students about AI, machine learning and the Internet of Things, and it's hands-on activities by doing like a garden monitoring system. They have lessons on how they're collecting data, how they're putting it into Excel, how they're analyzing it.
Excel now has AI built into it.
Yes, and that's part of it. They also use the AI to try it's Lobe, L-O-B-E AI that they use to tell them what type of pest might be on a leaf if they start getting like.
I remember I used the Bard for that. We have that little fourth grade kid or third grade kid over here. And I took a picture of it and used Bard to identify it. It was a type of a moth.
Lobe AI has probably more information in it. I don't know. Bard might have it by now, but it's to identify pests. And then they have to have like there's lessons on the ethics of AI, and it aligns with your educational standards, your AI education guidelines. And it's a huge resource. It's a comprehensive package. It has a detailed curriculum. It has the hardware that you need. It has activity guides, questions, answer keys.
It's too bad we're not doing that here in Atlanta.
I might go ahead and send this to
Superintendent?
maybe, well, some of the science teachers I think would be
That's true.
interested. We
They
have
may
a
already know.
science teacher. We have a science teacher at the junior high that has a huge garden.
It's true. She does. She's got the hydroponics and stuff
Yes.
in there. And we
Yes.
were talking about using that and feeding that data to an AI.
So, the overview of the program, as what it specifically says, is it provides students with a practical introduction to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the Internet of Things.
I'm going to a conference about that.
Yes, you are.
Next
in a couple of weeks.
No, it's not
20th?
this week, but the next, like the 20th. It's in Austin.
Yes. And it addresses educational standards and ethical considerations. So that is Farm Beats in a nutshell.
Yeah, we had a teacher here, but she left, unfortunately, before we could do it, who wanted to get a small robotic garden set up. It was cool. It was on little rails on the side and had a little arm that came out, and it monitored everything about the garden, soil moisture and all that other stuff. It wouldn't pull the weeds. It had a little finger that came out, and if a weed came up, it would push it back underground again. It was the coolest little thing.
It's like, no.
So you couldn't, because I guess it was harder to pull the weed.
Like whack-a-mole.
It was like playing whack-a-mole. But it was cool because it had used computer vision. And this was before these current large language models came out, because this was like 5 years ago. So it would be really cool to have it kind of feed that data into a large language model and actually see what kind of questions you could ask. I mean, at the end of the day, the great thing about these large language, the reason I like them so much is because I can take any piece of data, like a data sheet is what I use it for all the time. You dump it in there and now you can ask questions about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the same kind of thing. You take all this temperature data and soil moisture, and the one thing that Rachel and I both have trouble with is identifying pests.
Mm-hmm.
There's these huge databases out there, but I don't even know what questions to ask.
Well, and once you identify it, what do you do to get rid of it?
That's another thing. Once you see it, then you want a list of things, and then maybe you want to refine them. Maybe you don't want to use pesticides.
Right.
My grandmother was like the prototype for all the modern organic. My grandmother didn't use pesticides. At least if she did, not very much.
Mm-hmm.
She used to say, if it'll kill a bug, it probably can't be good for me either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So she had all these organic techniques for controlling pests, bringing in the good stuff to get rid of the bad. And so how do you know the difference between a good bug and I don't know the difference between a good bug and a bad bug. My dad
Right.
probably does, but I don't.
Yeah.
If I look at a little bug, it looks like a bug to me.
Right.
And so if it's eating the leaves on my plants, that's a bad bug.
Is it? Because what if your plant if you're not going to be eating your leaf?
My plants didn't do very well.
You know what I'm saying?
There was a little
It's
moth.
like,
You
if
saw
it's
what
a
they did.
carrot that's growing under the dirt,
It still needs that green stuff poking up. That's
for
what it's there
photosynthesis,
for.
But anyway.
That's what it's there for.
Okay, well, we are almost out of time. As a matter of fact, the last thing I want to say is, if you want to see something really, really cool, go to the internet and Google or go to your AI and ask it for videos showing artificial intelligence in agriculture.
Yeah, a lot of it focuses on robotics.
A lot of it does.
That looks cooler. And that stuff looks cooler than going, yeah, I've got an Excel spreadsheet here with all that data in it. It's all part of it. But
yeah, I mean, there was one I saw that it was sorting fish. It was sorting fish by weight.
And it looked like one of those little paddles on a ping pong.
Yeah, and so it had these fish coming down a conveyor belt.
Yeah,
And it would pull the fish based on the weight, because the conveyor belt had like scales underneath it.
And they sorted tomatoes that way too.
But then if every time that one paddle would move to get a fish, it would collect the data. So then they would be able to know how many of each weight of the fish they had collected.
Okay, it was the little paddles. What was that game? The game we used to pull in the ball with?
Pinball.
Was it pinball?
Pinball.
Yeah, the little paddle. It looked like pinball paddles.
Yes, it did.
I forgot what to call that game.
We're getting old.
Because I played that game.
So that's all the time we have. We rambled about AI in agriculture.
That's what you wanted to do.
But
You like
very,
agriculture.
Very fascinating. So hope that you guys listen next week to AI in Action. We are going to continue to explore tomorrow's technology today. And that brings us to the end of AI in Action, Exploring Tomorrow's Tech Today. We're Maurie and Jim, your guides on this exciting journey through the world of artificial intelligence. We hope today's conversation has left you with fresh insights and a deeper understanding of how AI is shaping our future. If you enjoyed our discussion and want to stay up to date with the latest in AI, make sure to subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. Remember, the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we can actively shape and influence with knowledge and action. So let's continue exploring, innovating, and taking action. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to sharing more exciting AI developments with you next time on AI in Action, Exploring Tomorrow's Tech Today.